you look at the Celtics and you're like, yeah, no one else was really in the All-Star conversation, and they've been awesome this year. Shouldn't Jaylen Brown get the credit? Welcome on to a Sunday night awards edition of Dunc'd On. It's been 2 months since we last checked in on this because beginning of February is around the trade deadline. So we're going to do one more of these. And then, of course, we'll have our final awards in a little more than a month's time. So we're going to talk MVP. We're going to talk all NBA. We'll even point out maybe some circumstances where if guys weren't subject to the 65 game rule, they might have made our teams, which I think is always interesting to discuss. Coach of the year, defensive player of the year, sixth man of the year, rookie of the year, and a few of our own as well. We'll see how far we get into it in tonight's program, but I guess we can start with the MVP, Danny, where thankfully everyone of import is still eligible, though they're some are hanging on by a thread at this point.
And so that leads us to you get to a little bit of the uncomfortability, but thankfully we don't have as much of it. I would say in terms of this, in terms of so to me the three best players in the league so far this year, worth noting, Giannis Antetokounmpo is all the way ineligible. So even if he were in the were in that, like, he's only played 30 games this year. To me, the three best players in the league so far this year have been Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, and Victor Wembanyama. I would say in any order, but for me, it is that order. All of them have missed significant time already. Shai's at 50. So they've all missed significant time. They've all played less than some of their other brethren, like very good players that I will have on all NBA teams. And so you do have a little bit of that reconciliation of, is it more important to play better or to play more? There's a little bit of that, but I didn't see that as being as big a story in this as it can be certain other times. And we'll see where things are at the end of the year. Hopefully these guys all play enough.
Yeah, hopefully that's the case, but we will play it as it lies for right now. Nikola Jokic is at 44 games played. Shai is at 50, and Victor Wembanyama is at 45 games played. Although he's been much lower in terms of the minutes, he's spent a lot of time on minutes, so he's only at 29 minutes per game. Jokic is at 34.5. Shai is at 33, but also the Thunder have blown out so many teams that would surely be higher. And Shai has the most number of minutes among that trio. I agree with you that those three are the three most effective. I wouldn't put Victor in the same category as Jokic and Gilgeous-Alexander quite yet. But especially, I would say, with the games played advantage, and also the fact that since Nikola Jokic has returned from injury barely in time to potentially still be eligible for awards if he's able to complete the season and not miss, I think what he's got like a 1 or 2 game cushion. Gilgeous-Alexander was higher for me. He also has missed some time with this oblique, but Jokic has fallen off some since he's returned. It hasn't really been as effective with the jump shot. Also been dealing with a wrist issue as well. I think his defense has certainly been an issue for the Denver Nuggets. And with that being the case, Shai to me is the clear MVP at this point in time. There was a moment in late December when Jokic really got it rolling, where we thought maybe he would be on track to surpass Shai, and then he got hurt. And he basically, to the extent that he has played since we last did awards, it's been not quite at his normal level. So Shai is kind of the obvious guy to me, I would say, at this point.
Agreed. And the argument that Jokic has been a superior offensive player, like, yeah, that's totally reasonable. He's been more efficient as an individual scorer. The Nuggets offense has been better with Jokic on than the Thunder offense has been with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on. But that's only part of the equation. And Jokic is a worse defender at a more important defensive position. And so it's harder to overcome that. Now, the Nuggets have had less availability for their best defenders than we would like, but that is still a part of it. He's the center. He's still the center. And so you can play better defenders with Jokic. They haven't had Aaron Gordon. Now they've been missing Peyton Watson. But, so just to have it out there, Nuggets 125.7 offensive rating with Jokic on the floor, Thunder 121.5. Those are close enough. Like 121.5 is a fantastic number. plus. And we
Well,
focus more
I
on
mean, I don't know if I don't know if they're close enough. That's a 4 point difference. I mean, we're Jokic has right now basically the highest number we've ever seen in that stat, and I guess to some extent he does have Jamal Murray with him, right? Like that's important to remember. Shea doesn't have any player that's remotely similar to him, and Shea also has to play with another center a lot of the time as well. Jokic being a center that has a lot of value, but he can also spread the floor. But he's been playing with a lot of non-shooters as well. So I would say Jokic is off the the OKC also doesn't have a shooter like Cam Johnson. They don't even necessarily have a shooter like Tim Hardaway as good as he's been, although Jokic certainly has helped him be more efficient. Hardaway may come up in a later category. But yeah, I mean, 125.7 is basically the highest on-court offensive rating that we've seen, and we're not in like the absolute highest offensive environment right now, compared to a few of these years. So Jokic is clearly the better offensive player, but I think Shea being a part of what's still an unbelievable OKC defense and still that plus 15.7 net rating when he's on the floor, it is huge. I had one other point I wanted to make, but was there anything else you wanted to
nope.
focus on?
Go ahead.
So the Denver Nuggets have really struggled in the clutch this year. If you were going to say it's close, which I don't think that it is, Denver is only 14-16 in clutch games, and you might say, "Well, is that really that bad?" Clutch games are a toss-up. Well, not when you account for where they were entering the clutch. They actually have entered the clutch in pretty good shape to win those games. If you're up 5 entering the clutch versus down 5, that's a huge difference. But Denver has won 3.4 fewer games than expected, which is one of the absolute worst numbers in the league. Brooklyn is a sterling negative 5.3 in that category. But then Houston and Denver are basically even after that as the second and third worst teams. So, and then OKC is about even, a little bit better than average, point plus 0.9. They're 16-10 in clutch games.
Well, and you want another wild stat on that? Sorry.
Yeah.
The Nuggets defensive rating with Jokic on the floor in the clutch is a 135.6.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure there's some shooting luck involved there as well. But again, like that was a big part of Jokic's argument for a long time, was that his teams consistently were really good in the clutch year after year. And just for whatever reason, that hasn't been the case this season. So, yeah, I mean, and Shea also has the games played advantage of 6. I mean, it's really just tough to make the argument for you, but it's still, we should not lose track of just how unbelievable he was before getting hurt, and he still has the playing time advantage over Victor Wembanyama as well. You said though you felt like it could be any order between those three. I mean, maybe that was just your intro. But is Wembanyama like a serious consideration for second to you?
No, I have them in separate tiers. So I have Shea in one tier, Jokic in a separate tier, and then a group that includes Wembanyama. I think Wembanyama has been the third best player, minutes played, all that sort of stuff, all factors in. So I have a group from, let's call it 3 to 6. That the idea that we do for tiers is that you can make a credible argument to have them in a different order than the order I have them in. So I think Wembanyama, he's been better than the other guys, but also the other ones that I'll mention, and we could of course have a different list. They haven't been as good per minute, but they've played more minutes. They've been very valuable in their own right.
This will come up more in defensive player of the year, although maybe it won't, because I think Wembanyama is so obviously that at this point. For a long time, I've had the feeling that, at least as far as individual players are concerned, that offense is just more important than defense. It's the rare skill. Your replacement level is higher, right? And you can help it being a bad defender versus a bad offensive player. Like it's easier to deal with a bad defender than a really bad offensive player, just in general. And just at the replacement level, the worst defenders have less of a distance from the best defenders than the best offensive players have from the worst offensive players in the NBA. Victor Wembanyama is maybe the one guy in my lifetime who I might be willing to change that assessment for, because he's not quite throwing it back to Bill Russell. Like Bill Russell is one of the few guys where, because of the game, the way the game was played and just how dominant he was and how few other players with his athleticism there were at that time, that his skills were just completely irreplaceable on the defensive end. And you saw that from when some of those Celtics teams, like the 64 Celtics, were one of the worst offenses in the league. They might even been the worst offense in the league and still had the best net rating in the league just because Bill Russell made their defense that good. And so much, even the number one defense was of such greater magnitude than having the last offense that they still were, like a 60 win team because of him. And no one's ever going to replicate what Bill Russell was, just because everyone was taking 2-pointers back then. Offense was way lower. He was playing 48 minutes a game. There wasn't any athleticism around the league compared to today's game. But Victor's getting close to that. And it's probably the eye test more than it's anything else, of just the number of shots that are being passed up and the way shot charts are being warped. And particularly some of the stuff that I started looking at, and hopefully this is something we'll have more of a full season look at relatively soon, is what he does to opponents' half court offenses and changes their shot distribution there. Because you'll see teams, oh yeah, they got 17 shots at the rim in this game, but yeah, half of them came off offensive rebounds in transition. Teams, most games when Victor Wembanyama is on the floor, teams are getting single digit field goals made at the rim in the half court that I've looked at. So it's just, he's the first guy where you're just like, man, like if you go up against him in a playoff series, like we have to have a whole different game plan just because of him on the defensive end. And then some of the numbers too, Danny, which I'm sure you would love to get into here, really support that. Maybe even on a per play basis, he is up there already with Jokic and Gilgeous-Alexander.
The one you inspired me to look it up, talking about half court offense, and we don't have all of this, as you said, quite exactly as we would want it. But when Victor Wembanyama is on the floor, opposing offenses score 0.907 points per half court offense play. That is not the best in the league, but it is very strong. And that as good as his main backup Luke Cornett is on defense, that's still markedly better than when Cornette's on the floor. And the Spurs have not had, they've not been extraordinarily lucky in terms of opponent 3-point shooting percentage or anything like that during Wembanyama's minutes. So there's reason to believe that that's real. And so, yeah, if we're grading that out, and I don't even think Wembanyama needs that full bump to be the third best player in the league so far this year. But if you so I'll use EPM as an example here. The strongest offensive EPM in the league is Jokic at plus 8.1. The strongest defensive EPM, which is not Wembanyama, it's actually Asar Thompson, is at plus 3.5. So if we were to say that the delta between those two is too large, that the way that this works out, that Wembanyama deserves more credit for the Spurs' defensive success than anyone is currently getting, not that EPM is gospel on that, well then you start to get into the maybe he works his way into this conversation. But also Wembanyama, his games played, his minutes played isn't up here. So I think it could be a very fascinating conversation to have at some point in best players, but of course these are all moving targets. Wembanyama a year from now will be a very different player. Jokic and Shea will be as well. But it's at least a conversation worth having.
Yeah, so even with only 1,300 minutes, only 29 minutes a game, and 14.8 net rating when he's on the floor, and that's he's a new guy. He is up there with these best guys, and yeah, he's gonna have to prove it in the playoffs. He's gonna have to prove that he can stay healthy. He's gonna still need to refine his offensive game, although even that is very solid. I mean, this is a Spurs team that has a pretty good offense, and you can see that he brings a lot of gravity, even if I would appreciate some more refinement for him. 61.5% true shooting on 32 usage still makes him one of the most efficient scorers in this group of players that we're looking at. So I'm just incredibly impressed by what he's done, incredibly impressed by what the Spurs have done. And quite frankly, like they don't what they're doing right now, they don't have another all-star level player on the team. Like I know De'Aaron Fox made it as a afterthought, but he's not playing at an all-star level this year. And so for them to be that good when he's out there that's just remarkable. You know, like these are that net on number again. Like the Spurs, they got a nice team around him, but you can't tell me, oh, they're just some like unbelievably loaded team, and that shows up in the fact that they're basically even when he's off the floor. That they've had some good moments certainly this season when he's been out, but nonetheless, like that's those numbers are pretty insane, and like you don't see that kind of an on number from a superstar unless they are like really a historical type of player.
So I've mentioned that I have Jokic. I do have him third in MVP, but I have him in a tier with other players. How are you seeing that part of the
Wembanyama
tier?
or Jokic?
Wembanyama. No, Jokic is in a tier by himself at
Oh,
2.
okay, all
Then
right, yeah, you said
Wemby is
gotcha.
third in a group with other guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't say he's in a group with other guys to me. I my number 4 is Cade Cunningham, and I do think that what he's done I'm certainly concerned that his true shooting is below the league average, and he does still turn the ball over more than you would like. But he's a big part of a successful defense. There are moments where he's going to lose focus and with his offensive load, not be able to switch on to the best guys. I get that, but he still takes pride in his defense. He's a great leader. He does a lot in terms of stocks as well defensively. So as superstars go, perimeter superstars go, he's definitely towards the higher end in terms of his defense. And then, yeah, his individual efficiency is not that great. But when you consider what Detroit is now, some of that's offensive rebounding, sure. But for this group to have a 119 offensive rating when he's on, and obviously he doesn't hurt their defense, he's another guy, plus 11 net rating is about as good as it gets, other than Jokic and Gilgeous Alexander in terms of the top rank superstars this season. And also, there isn't really anyone else I felt particularly jazzed about at this strength. I had Luca up in this range before. Donovan Mitchell, he's fallen off a little bit in terms of like his 3-point shooting and overall efficiency. Still very good. He might be my fifth guy. But and Luca, I think just the Lakers' performance has been pretty underwhelming. He's been a big part of that. He's missed some time as well. So yeah, I think Cade to me is a very clear fourth at this point.
I have him fourth too. And I think that here's the stat that I want to lean on. I'm really happy you brought this up. But so Kate Cunningham's individual efficiency is very bad relative to these guys, 56.5. It's below league average. But these are the offensive ratings with so like kind of the next group for me of players with this player on the floor. Pistons with Cade, 119.2. Knicks with Jalen Brunson, 121.1. Cavs with Donovan Mitchell, 118.8. And Lakers with Luca, 118 flat. So Cade Cunningham, despite his individual inefficiency, the team is very effective offensively, and then he's clearly the best defender of that foursome. And the Pistons are the best defensive team of that foursome as well. And so and in terms of total creation, like he's not up there with like he's not quite where Luca is because basically no one is. But in terms of the other guys, like I mean, he has a larger total creation than Jalen Brunson, larger than Donovan Mitchell, and so the individual like it's a little bit different than some of the other guys we might talk about later on the list, where it's like, oh, they're not super efficient themselves, and their team is fine. Like Kate Cunningham, I'm not get, like his team is good enough offensively. They've been this great team. So I agree. I do have him in the same tier with some of these other guys, but I think he does have the fourth best case.
Yeah, and also his playmaking probably still doesn't get enough credit and he doesn't have maybe the same spectacular passes as someone like Doncic. And you could certainly say again, he's got so much time of possession, so much time on the ball that it juices these numbers. But our passing creation metrics, which or metric, which measures what percent of your team's possession do you either throw an assist or a pass that leads to a shot or free throws, 21.3. That's second in this group below Nikola Jokic, who's 22.2, and Luka, who I think some people would say has better individual numbers. He's at 17.2. Who'd you have fifth?
It's a close race. I ended up with Donovan Mitchell fifth over Brunson, and then Luca's shortly behind that. But I went with Mitchell. He's an effective individual player, so 61.4% true shooting. He has a larger total creation load than Jalen Brunson does, though Brunson not anywhere near Steph Curry, but like he has some other benefits within the Knicks system. And so I went with Mitchell over Brunson over Doncic.
Yeah, I didn't feel particularly strong about this fifth spot, but Donovan Mitchell, I think, can still be up there. Uh, we'll see what comes of this groin issue. It's not supposed to be a long term thing. He's played 1,800 minutes, 55 games, which is a lot more than Luca. Brunson's been pretty healthy also. But I think Mitchell gives a little bit more on defense. And as much as you want to say it kind of seems like Brunson's on the better team, actually, Cleveland and New York are just about neck and neck. The Knicks have a little bit better offensive rating when Brunson's on the floor, but his defense has been really bad this year. I do think that I don't focus as much on guard defense, maybe as some people do, at least in the regular season. But I do think that Brunson's on off splits defensively are pretty miserable this year, and the need deserves some blame for that. And yeah, Cavs are better when Mitchell's on the floor than Brunson. So that's one again. I don't feel particularly strong about it. Luca has played less than those two guys. His defense is pretty bad. I don't think his leadership has been particularly good this year. The Lakers just haven't been that good of a team. And I mean, the biggest thing you can point to, and he's having actually one of his more efficient individual offensive seasons, but the Lakers just haven't been a dominating offense with Luka Doncic, despite the fact that they've had a fair amount of playmaking talent around him. And they do, as much as you want to talk about DeAndre Ayton, like he is a pretty efficient pick and roll finisher. That's not scoring efficiently has never been his problem. So I just haven't. And when I watch the Lakers this year, especially against good competition, I just haven't seen Doncic dominating to the level that I think his individual statistics would indicate. So he's going to make my All NBA second team. But uh, was there anyone else in consideration for you for top five and MVP?
I don't think so. I mean, I would say to me the next best player has been Kawhi Leonard, but Leonard has also played fewer minutes and games than a lot of these other guys. Like he's on the low end of that overall. So to me, even if you were going to argue that Kawhi per minute was kind of close, like he's played fewer games and fewer minutes than Luka Doncic, and Luka's played fewer than some of these other guys. So like I'll have Kawhi on my second team All NBA as well, but I think that no one else to me has a top five MVP case.
Yeah, Kawhi, Anthony Edwards, maybe you could have thrown those guys in there. I know Jalen Brown has been getting some discussion. Unfortunately, his individual statistics are not that good, and even the team statistics, although he has been hurt some by just some bad shooting luck, they just aren't indicative of a player who's at this level. And while you look at the Celtics, and you're like, yeah, no one else was really in the All Star conversation, and they've been awesome this year. Shouldn't Jalen Brown get the credit? I think he has a better argument than say Donovan Mitchell or sorry, Devin Booker did for Phoenix's success before he was getting hurt all the time. But it's still you're just not and he's had some really dominating games, and he also soaks up basically all the bad shots for that team because he and Peyton Pritchards are the two guys who are really creating one-on-one, and they do a lot of self-created stuff. He's having a good playmaking season, but I don't think Jaylen Brown is quite there with slightly below average true shooting. And while he is, I think, can be a very good individual defender, not really a great team defender, doesn't do a lot in help. It's tough for anyone to have the offensive load that he does and like truly be a difference maker on their side. Like it definitely is really useful that he can't be attacked one on one the way a lot of other perimeter scorers can be. But he's seemed like more of a second team All NBA guy, and I felt like I was even being generous to put him there if you look at the stats, honestly.
I have Jaylen Brown on the third team, but the argument for Jaylen Brown being closer to this, there's a very basic one that I think somewhat is somewhat persuasive, which is this: Jaylen Brown's total creation is actually, so this year, because he's jumped up incredibly here, 47.9. That is higher than James Harden's this year. So Jaylen Brown's role within their offense is higher than James Harden's was, and he's played on two teams and all that stuff. And the Celtics have this sterling 119.2 offensive rating. So you're like, hey, this guy's the most important offensive player for one of the league's best offenses. However, the one thing that always sticks to us, and and I do focus more on the on than the off, is that the Celtics offense is actually better when he's off the floor, and they don't have another all-star. It's not like, it's not the Jamal Murray Jokic lift thing. It's just that they've been a great offensive team either way. And so I'll talk about one of the reasons for that in a different award later on. So I think Jaylen Brown, I have him third team. I wouldn't have any qualms about him being second team. He's on that periphery, but I don't think he's been as good this year as Kawhi or Anthony Edwards, let's say. And so, like, yeah, if he's the 10th best player or the 12th best player, like, sure, that's fine. But he's not been fifth.
Yeah, even looking at the one number metrics, he's just not really in the same realm as some of the other guys as well. And I don't entirely rely on those, but I still think that if you're just, it's very rare that a guy's going to be 30th in those. I'm talking about him as a top five player in the league. I am interested to see who you had above him on your second team. Let's go there.
It was not an offense first player. It was instead Chet Holmgren. And Holmgren will feature largely in our Defensive Player of the Year conversation later on. And what makes Holmgren different than a few others, so he's another, I don't think of him necessarily as perfectly, as cleanly in the him alone defensive test as Victor Wembanyama, but the thing that Chet Holmgren has that I really value is that he's an effective, not only is he a multi-position defender, he's playing some of the four and some of the five, but also he is a very efficient offensive player in his own right, even though center / power forward is the most effective positions. 65% true shooting, and he has he has a decent, very few centers other than Jokic have a crazy passing load, but like he has a respectable role within his team's offense. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the league, and I think we'd probably be praising that even more if a certain gigantic Frenchman weren't available. But I think that for me, if I were to say who's been better between, like, who's contributed more to their team's success, Holmgren or Jaylen Brown, it's a close call, but I'd say it's Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, I moved Holmgren down to third team this time just because I felt that his offense wasn't good enough to really be a second team All NBA player in this time that OKC really needed him to do more. He really just, with all of their guards out, he just hasn't been able to take on more of a load. And he was very efficient in a supporting role before that and was putting up pretty decent usage in the low 20s and true shooting in the high 60s. And so looking at it now, yes, there we are. We don't have to scroll down that far to find him. Yeah, looking at it now, that number has dropped now at 64.7% true shooting. Still very solid. Does basically nothing as a playmaker and passer, which is again, that's disappointing that he wasn't able to give them more of that. So still, he's been an excellent player, but certainly I think for his offense to be impactful, he's more reliant on great setup men that I would have liked. And so that's why I moved him down just a little bit. Some of the crazy on off numbers have muted at least some. Uh, no, still awesome, by the way. 103.5 defensive rating when he's on the floor is still zero point 0.5 better than Victor and the best of anyone that we're looking at in this sample. But it just, I think even because like Evan Mobley, his case like kind of similar to like Evan Mobley's last year, right? I just felt like Evan Mobley was not doing it this year, but he's doing much more offensively last year than Chet Holmgren is doing. I think they're pretty similar on the defensive end. Maybe Holmgren's a little bit better as a rim protector, Mobley better as an all court force, and he's obviously had less around him as well. So yeah, I think if I'm just like all of your guards are hurt and Chet Holmgren is putting up like 13 points on 5 of 12, I'm like, that's not a second team All NBA player to me. That's kind of where I ended up on that.
And there's some statistical basis for it. One of the things, and this is funny how this kind of cuts in both of our directions. And again, I don't think this is a massive disagreement, but is this so the Thunder with Chet Holmgren on and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander off the floor this year, they have a plus 7.4 net rating. That's fantastic. And it is by virtue of them being just ridiculously elite on defense, 102.3. Their offense has been terrible. It's been well below
Yeah.
league average,
Yeah.
110. So it's like, so you can, that cuts both directions because you're like, yes, a great version, a great player, a more traditional best player or number two who could step into a number one would be able to do that. However, it's also true that he's giving a much better defensive foundation than most of those guys. So I don't like, for me, and a part of the reason that I moved Chet up there, because I didn't have, that you had him higher than me last time, is that I think the cases for, like, I feel worse about my third team now than I did then.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so
With
to
all
me,
with all the injury issues. Yeah.
exactly. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily that Holmgren rose, it was that other guys fell. And so to me, it was just he's the best. Like he's in this mix with a lot of other guys that we're going to talk about imminently. But I didn't like, and we've already talked about Jaylen Brown. So like again, I have him as the 10th best player in the league this year. Like, it's the reverse of Jaylen Brown. I have him 10th. If somebody else had him 13th, I'm not going to say they're dumb.
Yeah. So my second team, Anthony Edwards, was on there as well.
Yes.
He's kind of carving out that spot as on second team All NBA these last couple of years, the same way Jason Tatum carved out like the fourth spot in MVP voting over like the last 5 years at this point in time, where again his offense is ridiculous. This off the dribble shot making that he's got is ridiculous. They are much better offensively when he's on the floor at this point. They are much better defensively when he's off the floor, which I think is noteworthy. And I think he's having, as his offense has gotten better, his defense has kind of gotten worse. And I think they've had some slippage in terms of mentality. And one of the things that really stood out to me about them 2 years ago when they had their best season in the Edwards era in the regular season was that they didn't have these slip ups against bad teams. They had this amazing defense. And while he's not the sole reason that that's dropped, I do think that, and Rudy Gobert obviously was amazing 3 years ago. He's been really good this year too, not quite at the same level as he was 3 years ago. So, but yeah, I mean, Edwards is just rock solid as an offensive player. Still want to see more from him as a playmaker, only 7.6% passing creation for, especially considering that they haven't really played a point guard this year anymore. It's not like someone else is vulturing those assist opportunities in the backcourt. And I still think he should be able to leverage his incredible shooting more as a passer than he has. But nonetheless, like his individual scoring has been awesome. And he also can lock in defensively at times. So yeah, certainly you'd be hard again. Like I don't know who you're going to put above him on this second team either. That's ultimately where I end up. Did you have anything else on Brunson's case? You had him second team as well, right?
I had Brunson second team as well. Not really. I mean, the Knicks offense has been great when he's been on the floor. Their defense hasn't been fabulous, and Brunson is a part of that limitation. But no, I think that he's pretty comfortably in this. The one that so Anthony Edwards, I'll agree with you. And one of the other weaknesses for Edwards, you brought up the passing creation, is just that feeds into his total creation, which he's at 39.3, which is well below a lot of the other guys we talked about. So he's an important part of Minnesota's offensive success, and their offensive rating is roughly in the same vicinity as a lot of these other guys we've talked about. But he has a smaller role within it. And Edwards making ridiculous 40% on 8.5 threes per 36 is fantastic, but it doesn't carry over as much as some of the other guys. So like I think Ant is great. I think that Ant earns his place here. And just because I think we kind of got to it by acclamation, just to put a little bit on Kawhi, because he's another one of these like clear cut second team, but we didn't have any drama, so we didn't talk about it. Kawhi this year, 72% true shooting. He's doing 38% on threes, taking the most threes he's ever.
70. Did you say 72% true shooting?
That's no, 62% true shooting.
Okay, sorry.
62% true shooting. Taking the most threes of his career, 7.7 per 36, making 38% of those, and also just his ridiculously efficient 56% on twos. I don't think he's nearly the defensive player that he was in his past. That's okay. He doesn't have to be. And so like Leonard, the Clippers have been this disappointing team overall, but like Leonard has been great in the ways that he needs to be great. And to me, it's just that's the level of player that he's been. And I mean, you've brought it up that even if we, this counts the whole season, like if you narrow the sample size, he might even be better than this but the whole season counts.
Yeah, also 2.2 steals per 36. That's definitely, I think that's leading the league right now, at least in terms of qualifiers. I will apologize that I'm not all that up on who's leading the league in the counting stats these days. You could talk about Brunson, actually, since we haven't quite given him his love yet, I suppose.
Jalen Brunson, 45% total creation. So that is a little bit lower than some of the guys. It's about even with Steph Curry, though Steph Curry does all the softball stuff. It's a little more than Tyrese Maxey, who we'll discuss presumably later. But the Knicks offense has been fantastic when he's been on the floor. 121.1 is, of the guys kind of in this vicinity, of the guys who are clearly the best offensive player in their team. Like the only ones who have a better offensive rating with them on the floor are the Nuggets with Jokic and the Thunder with Shea. So, I mean, if you're going to, on that perspective, now he is a worse defender than Shea by a lot. And so all that. So, yeah, I mean, and Brunson, he's effective enough. He's more like 59% true shooting. So like he's effective there. 38% on threes, taking 8 per game is nothing to sneeze at. And he's a good passer, even if he's not at the level of like a Luka in terms of his passing creation. But yeah, I mean, he's like another one of those, like definitely one of the best, but not one of the absolute best guys in the league.
So I guess that takes us through 11 players. I thought there was another drop off here. I think Kevin Durant still made my third team. There are some guys, again, that I might like. If Steph Curry were still eligible, he would have been in this group for me, but it looks like he's not going to come back for some time at this point. Obviously, Giannis, if you were, I don't know if he's played so few games that you probably would have to even not have him on All NBA, even if he were eligible. But those are probably the two that I would have considered who are just not become eligible. But Kevin Durant, to me, just still having a very good individual season, and while he shouldn't get too much benefit from the fact that he's really been their only reliable off the dribble creator, he's definitely up there in terms of the impact metrics. 6.8 net rating when he's on. They're a lot better offensively. Well, not a lot better. They're better offensively when he's on, but also they're kind of propped up by offensive rebounding to some extent when he's off the floor. And 63% true shooting and 27 usage is still very solid. I don't know. I'm actually like kind of falling out of love with him as a pick at this point, but I'm like,
Oh,
because I was like, oh, they've been pretty bad in the clutch. He deserves some blame for that. But I'm not in love with any of these candidates at this point, and he still is a fantastic all-star level of player. I mean, that's pretty clear watching him at this point in time, and he's one of the best shot makers in the NBA as well. So, yeah, I'm not like totally in love with it, but I'm not sure who I would want to replace him with at this point.
yeah, I think that you touched on something that was one of my dynamics for this last group, and I agree with you on kind of where this drop off is, of where there's this collection of guys, and part of the who made the team and who didn't make the team was about just like there were some guys where I looked at and I was just like, do I really want them on? Like, and I'll bring up who those players are, but I want like so it's it's these like you kind of it's that idea you kind of put it back and forth. But I have Durant, I have him a little lower on my third team, but I do have him there. The next guy I want to talk about, and it's funny because we talked about him in the anti-aesthetic pod, is Denny Avdia. And Avdia, he it's a similar case in certain ways and a different case in others. So the part of it that's different is that the Portland Trailblazers offense is significantly worse with Denny Avdia on the floor than a lot of these other teams. They're a 115.8 is well below a lot of the almost all of the ones we've talked about, and even some of the other ones, and some of the like guys that we haven't yet talked about because their cases aren't quite this strong. However, Avdia has this gargantuan role within the offense when he plays, a total creation of about 46%. So that's in the vicinity of some of these, like, that's a little bit below Donovan Mitchell. It's a little bit above Jalen Brunson. So like he has a Jamal Murray, he's over Jamal Murray. But the reason that you see it, so one is that he's effective as an individual scorer in part because he gets to the line a billion times. Basically 10 free throw attempts per 36 is the only guys who are higher than him on a per 36 basis are Giannis, who's ineligible, Shea by a fraction, and then Luca. And so like, but it's not always the most fun to watch. But the reason why Avdia is here for me is not like, oh, he's been this amazing defender. It's that you see his value in the off. We don't focus on it, but the Portland Trailblazers, in part because of their player availability and in part because of their just overall talent, they don't have a ton of shooting. They have a lot of centers who are limited offensively, as good as I like them in certain other respects. And so the Blazers he's their only guy. So they've had to lean on him a lot. And so Avdia, they have a 115.8 offensive rating when he's on the floor, and that drops to a 109.4 when he's off the floor. And I think that shows how limited the Blazers' overall offensive talent has been. So I think he's had a big lift. I think he's done well. And I'm not saying he's like, to me, there's this whole group that's just kind of a morass. And I think he's towards the top of that morass for me.
Yeah, and despite only playing 48 games, he's still over 1,600 minutes, and that's including having to leave a couple of games early as well with this back issue. Now, he'll be a fascinating case. He can't get himself anything yet in terms of making All NBA, but if he makes it this year and makes it next year, then he would be eligible for the designated player veteran extension, and all of Portland's issues about having to renegotiate and extend it would go away. Now, their other issue would be that they would have to, or at least he'd be eligible to receive 35% of the salary cap, but that's another problem. But he certainly, it would behoove him to push to try and make it this year. I would be surprised if he does, just because Portland is it's rare that guys on a team like Portland, especially if you're not someone who's even been an all-star before, are gonna make all NBA. So I would advise him not to push too hard for it and just get his back right. But nonetheless, yeah, he made it for me as well. Um, he was like maybe my last guy in, just because this last month or so has been pretty disjointed for him. But yeah, his carry job has been impressive. I do think that he deserves some blame for the fact that their defense has been pretty terrible when he's been on the floor for a team that was supposed to be a defensive team. And he, I think, can be a good defender, but he also has had to do so much on offense that's kind of fallen apart for him. But at 117.5 offense or defensive rating when he's on the floor is not very good. Overall, the fact that they are negative 1.7 when he's on the floor, again, it's tough for any player to make all NBA when your team is a negative net rating when you're on the floor. And
True.
as much as I would say, yes, like how many City Sissoko's and Caleb Loves is he supposed to be carrying here. I certainly understand that aspect of it. But I'm he kind of squeaked in for me. He definitely was a very strong candidate, I felt, when we did it in January, but he hasn't really added to his case since then, with some of the issues that he's had with the back, and hasn't been as effective when he's been out there. To me, the obvious next candidate was Jamal Murray, and this is the year that he's finally kicked the allegation, which was true, that he wasn't able to lift Denver without Nikola Jokic. They actually have a 117.8 offensive rating when he's on the floor, 71st percentile without Nikola Jokic. And while they are negative and he's not a great defensive player, it's mostly because their defense has been so horrible. Jonas Valanciunas, and probably not a real power forward, there's doing more of the work in that bad defensive outcome than Jamal Murray is, especially when he's the only guy who can do anything with the ball in those non-Jokic lines. And then, of course, the other argument is how much he's pushed them to be one of the greatest offenses of all time when he is playing with Jokic. That's very additive also. And also, I think having one of his better distribution seasons, we saw that when Jokic was out. I think the fact that he was able to hold them over 500 when Jokic was out. Now they've struggled since he came back, but that's not entirely Murray's fault. So I've just been really impressed by him, and yeah, just like, he was on my All NBA team last time, and certainly hasn't done anything to reduce his case this time.
Nate, I believe this is the first time in any monthly awards that I've ever had Jamal Murray on an All NBA team, and I do. He
Yeah,
100% deserves it. And
yeah. Well, I
the
think this is, for me, it was maybe last month and the month before too.
And so it's, I mean, he's been great, and he's been important in the non-Jokic minutes. He helps elevate them, and in part, like I brought up, it's this morass. Like I like what he has done for them better than some of his other some of these other brethren and everything else. And so yeah, I mean, I think that he has absolutely earned his place in this conversation. And yeah, you don't want to necessarily lean as heavily on the like, oh, the offensive rating when he's on the floor, because the best offensive player on the planet is also on his team. But he still has a really good case. So yeah, I'm pleased that he's done that. My last spot was one that I was really torn on, and so I can walk through some of the players that I've considered. One of them is Harden. I like Harden, the basic numbers on it. Like I invoked his name when I talked about Jaylen Brown, where it's like, he's been the driving force behind some effective offenses, even if the teams have been disappointing. 119.5 offensive rating with 47.7% total creation. That's one of the highest that you see. Like that's a pretty obvious case for like, oh, this guy should obviously be an All NBA player. However, he is horrendous defensively, and he was a big reason why the Clippers were so disappointing defensively. Even if center is the most important defensive position, he was a point of failure for them a fair amount, and they didn't have enough to clean up his messes. And like he also, I think Kawhi has been when they were teammates, Kawhi was the better Clipper. So I think that for me, like Harden is in the conversation. And we could talk about some of the other guys too.
Yeah, he just didn't make it for me, and I think, as much as I enjoy that he's in Cleveland now, he did still like quit on another team, and I don't begrudge him that in his own life, but he essentially, it's one of those things, is it's like the Chinese government where they punish enough people and now the free speech has been chilled. It's like James Harden, he didn't even have to say what was going to happen if he didn't get his extension or he didn't get his trade, right? Like
it was the
everyone
implication.
knew. So you're like, oh, well, hey, I didn't threaten anyone. Well, yeah, okay. Yeah, it was an amicable part. Like, all right, but you still have history as a threat out there enough without having to actually make it. So that does ding him a little bit. A 6-21 start for his team does ding him a little bit, although again, he was before Kawhi came online, he was keeping them afloat reasonably well offensively. So yeah, he was just outside of it for me. I went with Tyrese Maxey in that spot instead as my last guy. Well, I have noted I had him behind a fair number of guys in the past. Those guys are now ineligible, and Maxey was just on the outside looking in. And to the extent that it's close between him and some other guys, the number of minutes that he's playing is just absolutely deranged. Right now, he's played 57 games, 38.4 minutes a game. He's already at 2,189 minutes coming in today. That's insane. That is, I'm that's the league leader by like, I mean, so it's the leader in the sample of anybody who might reasonably considered for All NBA by almost 200 minutes. Like KD is second. He's the only other guy over 2,000 that we've mentioned so far. And his individual efficiency is going up a little bit. The team offensive rating has gone up a little bit too with him on the floor. Now, part of that is having Embiid, but the fact that he can play with Embiid and there is a synergy there is certainly useful. So, and they are actually now 7.2 points per 100 better when he's on the floor. That was another number that wasn't as obvious before. Some of that is defense, which I don't give him credit for, but his defense has definitely gotten better for sure in the last couple of years. So he filled out my team as the last guy.
I ended up with
Apologies to
Max.
Jalen Duren as well, but yeah, you
Yeah.
can react on Maxey, I suppose.
No, I ended up with him there too. I
Okay.
was reluctant as well. But I want to mention one other guy. I was very like, there's a part of me that's like, I actually at one brief moment had him on the team over Maxi, then pulled him. Was LaMelo. So LaMelo is a weird case because the Hornets with him on the floor have this unbelievable
Yeah.
offense. So
Yeah. I looked
125.8.
into this a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, 125.8 offensive rating when he's on the floor. But LaMelo is so inefficient himself, 54% true shooting, in part because he can't make a two to save his life. He's below 45%. You'd round up to 45 with him now. And he getting to the free throw line, the lowest free throw attempt rate of his career. It's the idea is like, I mean, that's an awesome offensive rating. The Hornets have a plus 10.8 net rating when LaMelo Ball is on the floor, the hottest team on the globe. But I think that putting LaMelo on this third team over somebody like Maxi, that underappreciates what a collaborative effort this is. Con Knipple, Brandon Miller, plenty of
Well, he's
other guys.
also as it's LaMelo has played 50 games, only 7 fewer than Maxey. LaMelo has played 800 fewer minutes than Tyrese Maxey has.
Yeah. It doesn't help when you're getting pulled from the end of games for defense. But also there's all this other stuff. But yeah, I considered LaMelo. Like, I think that this, depending on where this Hornets season goes, there is a possibility. But to me, Maxey has been better than LaMelo so far. And I'll echo you on Duren. I considered him, and I keep on having this thing of like Jalen Duren's a good player, but I keep on thinking that he's he's getting too much credit for what the Pistons are doing. Just because somebody has to. They've been fantastic, and we'll talk about some of the other guys that deserve credit for it as well.
Yeah.
But
He's had some pretty dominating performances lately, and if he keeps that up, maybe he will be right in the mix for their team. Last thing I'll say on LaMelo too, with that number, Hornets are shooting 6% better from three when he's on the floor versus when he's off, and that's not entirely his own making. A little bit, you know, he throws some good passes, like he's making shots himself, but uh, that nobody is going to cause his team to shoot 6% better from three when he's on the floor than when he's off in this day and age. There's just too much variance there. You can see that number, but it's not actually being caused by that person. All right, so let's go through our All NBA teams first. First team, I think we had all the same guys, right? Shea, Jokic, Victor, Cade, and Donovan Mitchell.
correct. And then
Second team?
my second team is Jalen Brunson, Luka Doncic, Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Edwards, and Chet Holmgren.
Yeah, and I had Jalen Brown there rather than Holmgren, who's on my third team, which also consisted of Durant, Jamal Murray, Tyrese Maxey, and Denny Avdia.
Yeah. Wow. We had the same 15. That doesn't usually happen with us.
Yeah, but like the 65 game rule is starting to make it so I think we were pretty close at the end of last year too. And I think it's maybe we both felt essentially there were 17 candidates and 15 guys. It's not that hard to end up there at this point in time. It's kind of 65 game rule is kind of making it a little bit more boring, honestly, because I thought it would be interesting to say, all right, Giannis comes back and he's played 49 games as the third best player in the league. Where does that fit in? Like, I thought that was actually an interesting analysis to try to do, but now that is being taken away from us.
So Nate, I will give you the controls here. What of the other awards do you think is most compelling?
Well, I think I would like to go. I don't know if it's the most compelling, but I think it's just the most convenient to knock out Defensive Player of the Year since we've hit on at least two of these players already. Victor Wembanyama is number one. I don't know that we really even need to get into it that much. I just throw out a couple of stats there just so we have them in terms of what he's been doing. Opponent rim field goal percentage is actually a little bit higher than it's been for him at times, 53.1%. That's not the absolute greatest in the league, but still among some of the realistic candidates right up there. Holmgren is lower. Also worth noting that Holmgren plays with another center a lot of times. Victor doesn't really do that all that much. And you've got all these other sharks around there as well. And then Victor's contest percentage is 35.7%. That's actually ahead of Chet. Chet's is much lower than it's been in past years because he hasn't played as much center. But the big thing that stands out is just the number of opponent shots at the rim. Let me pull that up real quick. But I think last time I looked at it, it was 24 per 100. And that's just an absolutely deranged number. I mean, even like we've seen maybe something that low at times when Rudy Gobert was on the floor. So this is how many rim shots per 100 is the opponent taking when this player is on the floor. Also, because of the fact that he prevents so many shots at the rim, and he's also a pretty solid defensive rebounder now. That the Spurs are a really good defensive rebounding team. All that plays into it. So that also helps to reduce shots at the rim when you're not giving up as many offensive rebounds as well. So it's really been incredible for Victor Wembanyama this year. Yeah, so that number it's actually gone up a little bit to 25.5, but nobody else is really particularly close to that. The next best guys are like another 2 per 100 higher in terms of their rim protection shots allowed while they're on the floor. And then, of course, there's that 104 defensive rating when he's on the floor, too. And just the fact that you might say, oh, yeah, they've got all these other good defensive players. I mean, they've got one other, I would say, like really premium defensive player in Stephon Castle. And even he, I think, is a little bit overrated. He's been dining out some on having Victor behind him because he's not as much of a playmaker. And then the rest of the guys are solid, but nobody amazing. And I think you can see that in the on-off splits with where he defensively, where it's hard to argue that they just have like so much other talent around. Like he really is a defense unto himself. Unless you have anything more for this Wembanyama hagiography, we could move on to number 2.
And Chet Holmgren's numbers are incredible in their own right. 35% contest rate, only 47% opponent conversion on the shots that Chet Holmgren contests. That is fantastically low. Opponents only take 27.1 rim attempts when he's on the floor, so he plays with Hartenstein, so a fair amount. So that's a little bit different. And the Thunder have this great 104.6 defensive rating with Holmgren on the floor, but opponents are actually shooting better from three with Chet out there than Wolves opponents with Gobert and Spurs opponents with Wembanyama. So you could see that number would actually, if you regress that to the mean, at least relative to his brethren, that would actually make that number even better. So like I think Chet Holmgren and the fact that he can be a great defensive player occupying the center role or the power forward role, like that's a really strong part of the argument. So I think Chet being number 2, I think that is kind of, by acclamation. I think that's kind of where he's been.
Yeah, I seriously considered Rudy Gobert for that spot. I ultimately decided that the guy on one of the best defenses of all time had to be out there. But the fact that this Wolves team, that admittedly he's being replaced by Naz Reid / Julius Randle at center most of the time, but for the Wolves to be almost 12 points, 100 better on defense when Rudy Gobert is on the floor. And not only that, but still a 107.9, which is a great, great number defensively. Some of his individual numbers in terms of rim protection are not so great, but he's still a great defensive rebounder. He can defend well in the post, which Chet can't really do. He can still defend some on the perimeter as well. He plays incredibly hard every night. Wasn't in the All NBA conversation for me because his offense is pretty bad, although it's been a little better this year. But Rudy Gobert is, and he also plays more minutes than Chet Holmgren does as well. Rudy's got, yeah, I'm. If it weren't for just how amazing the Thunder were on the team level, I would be very close to picking Gobert over Holmgren, but ultimately I have to go with there. But Rudy Gobert is having certainly an all defense caliber season and was an obvious number 3. I didn't really have anyone else that I considered, particularly for the top 3, to be close.
I'll just mention briefly some of these stats for a couple other guys. I'm not saying I seriously consider them for third, but Hartenstein contest rate's a little lower, 29%. Opponents are converting 52% on the shots he contests. The rim attempts are super low. They're actually even lower than Wembanyama, 24.7 per 100. Defensive rating is great. And then I want to throw one other guy out there. I'm not saying I considered him for top 3, but I'm also setting the table for something else. And that's just as a point of comparison. Mr. Isaiah Stewart. 32% contest rate. That is higher than Gobert, lower than Wemby and Chet. 42% field goal percentage on the shots he contests. That is way better than the other guys. Rim attempts are in the vicinity, 27.5. Pistons defense is worse, 111.6 defensive rating when he's on the floor, but opponents are shooting better on threes than anybody but Hartenstein. So I wanted to flag that because those numbers are fantastic, and he has enough of a sample that we can, and like you and I believed in Isaiah Stewart's defense. So I'm not saying that a guy who comes off the bench should be considered here, but those numbers are fantastic.
Yeah, I would probably have number 4 as Bam Adebayo, because the on-off splits are just too ridiculous to ignore. For those of you who say we're just massive slaves to our rim protection numbers, that is not the case. Bam Adebayo is one of the lower performing players just by those pure numbers. But the Miami Heat still managed to defend really, really well when he's out there. And they have some other good players. But again, like I would say with San Antonio, there's nobody else that's an all defense quality of player to me on that team. And when he goes off the floor, things kind of fall apart. He is just has such a massive impact on their defensive rebounding. That really matters. And just his ability to guard 1 through 5 and just never get attacked, allow you to play any coverage. Great communicator. He's so massive to their ability to switch up their defense, maybe more than any team in the league, that he's a distant 4th, but is also kind of an obvious 4th to me.
I have no opposition to that. I mean, Bam's a great defensive player. He has a big lift. I mean, the Heat have played a lot of flawed defensive players, even if some guys have been available and unavailable at different times.
All right, let's go to Coach of the Year.
It feels like we say this a lot, but this is an extremely strong crop. I mean, there are going to be people who I don't even have in the top 3 who have years that are deserving of a lot of praise. And we'll talk about those guys too. But for me, the top 2 here, and there are lots of other deserving guys. The top 2 is JB Bickerstaff and Joe Mazzulla. And I think that the way we talk about this, and I think this is correct, is that a coach has more impact on his team's defense. You get your guys to play hard, you get them to get back in transition, compete, make life hard, close possessions with rebounds, all that stuff. I think that is true overall. And the Pistons are number 2 in defense. They do have very good defensive talent overall, but not perfect defensive talent, especially I'm not the biggest Jalen Duren defensive believer. So JB Bickerstaff deserves a lot of credit. I have him here. I'm bending that a little bit because of the Celtics offense without Jason Tatum. And when you think about the Boston not only lost their best player, but also transitioned from a team that consistently played shooting at the center position. But then, due to things that were not inside Joe Mazzulla's control, they traded away Kristaps Porzingis. They let Al Horford and Luke Cornett walk. And for this team to still be a hair's breadth, they're 1/10 of 1 point per 100 possessions behind the Denver Nuggets for second in offense. That is an incredible accomplishment for Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics coaching staff.
No, it absolutely is, and even that they've defended as well as they have is a pretty big accomplishment given the talent that they lost, and rejiggering to not only have to go away from 5 out, where Joe, it seemed like for a while he wouldn't even play guys that wouldn't give you 5 out. Reluctantly, he would play Cornette or Neemias Queta last year, but now he'll even play Hugo Gonzalez and Jordan Walsh. Like those guys could shoot okay, but they're normally in the heyday of the Celtics rotation when they had all these shooters. Joe Mazzulla would have turned up his nose at such a player, and now having to use them. That was my big question at the start of the year: was what's it going to look like when he has to adjust to his personnel more? And he's done an unbelievable job of that. And certainly he's pushed these Celtics teams to really good performances. We're gonna do coach rankings with Hollinger this week, and Joe's gonna be an interesting candidate at the very top because he has had two pretty hopeless playoff defeats to lesser teams, and that's something that he's gonna have to answer for. But that's not part of this discussion necessarily. I do give the tie to the guy that I think is the better coach. And yeah, so to shift up the offense, make it more about pick and rolls, they're taking offensive rebounding way more seriously this year, and then their player development too, looking at guys like Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, even getting something out of Ron Harper here and there. Sam Hauser, of course, another guy that they have developed. Cada, Luca Garza, who's really good. Eventually got Anthony Simons to fit in before they traded him away. So it was really, and then the emotional standpoint as well to come in and, assholes like me were saying that it's going to be a gap year. Derek White, Jalen Brown, like how hard are those guys really going to play? Do they really want to push these guys? Will Jason Tatum even come back? And now he's got them a pretty clear second best team in the East, at least during this regular season. Very impressive. So I want to talk through it. And JB as well. Like it would be an interesting question to go back and think about who are the greatest coaching improvements from one coach to another in NBA history, but JB's got to be on the short list. Now, part of that is because of how bad Monty Williams was the year before him. But yeah, that's some other guy, like Doug Collins to Phil Jackson, or Kurt Rambis to Phil Jackson, or Mark Jackson to Steve Kerr. There are a lot of these throughout history that show up, and I don't know if JB Bickerstaff's going to win a championship with this group or not. He still is going to be dogged by the criticism that he's more of a regular season guy, but nobody saw this Pistons team being on track to win 60 games. I mean, this is absolutely insane where they're headed right now. So those two, I mean, I'm surprised that you didn't mention Mitch Johnson owing this. Are you just saying, well, because like his team has been, if you look at the over unders, his team has been just as big of a surprise. They're in the mix for the top seed in the West, top overall seed. Even, is it just that you give all the credit to Wembanyama? Or why would Johnson not be in that group for you?
I think that having Wemby helps a lot. I think that, I mean, the Spurs being eighth in offense is incredibly impressive. But I think that, I mean, they had a first team All NBA guy, but they don't have anybody else who's even in the vicinity. So yeah, I think that for me, Bickerstaff and Missoula have done a lot with like getting, they don't have an all world, as much as I love Cade, like they don't have an all world guy setting up their defense. And I believe that Wembanyama, like it doesn't seem like there's a lot of scheming to make Victor Wembanyama great on defense. I think there isn't a lot of scheming to make him as good as he's been on offense. And so I think that is something there. But to me, there's a delineation between Missoula and Bickerstaff and a ridiculously deep group of other coaches that are clear value adds, but just not quite at the same degree. And so like I think Mitch Johnson is clearly in that conversation. I also think that Jordan Ott is in that conversation. The
Yes.
Suns are so much better than I thought they'd be. I did a breakdown in the recent 1560 that I think their defense has a little bit of fool's gold regression to the mean in it, in terms of that they benefited a lot from opponent shooting. But there is a lot here that is so much better. I mean, you don't go from 27th to 9th in defense by look. Like, that's not, it's a part of the story, but it's not the whole story. They're going hard for forcing turnovers. He's put more stock in guys that were on the team but were being de-emphasized under Budenholzer. And they've been able to weather some very serious absences. I mean, we expected Jalen Green to be a huge part of this team, and he's basically not played at all this year. And they've leaned heavily on Brooks. He's done well. Devin Booker, to me, we didn't discuss him as an All NBA guy this year, even that's not related to his current injury. And so the Suns have been this incredible collection. I think that I could throw out another few unless you want to do. I have a bunch of other coaches that deserve shout outs.
Well, certainly Charles Lee, and
Yes.
keeping it together after a 4-14 start, and playing all these rookies and young players, basically guys who have never played winning basketball before, and for them to emerge into this incredible juggernaut. And a lot of that is based on the system that he's installed, with all the guard screening, guys interacting, also pick and roll heavy, but utilizing the dribble, pass, and shoot of those three perimeter guys, Miller, LaMelo, and Con Knipple. And now he kind of lucked into it. It's not quite Draymond Green for David Lee, but it's Musa Diabate for Ryan Kalkbrenner did really unlock something for them. So yeah, certainly he would be in another year on the short list when you didn't have these surprise teams that absolutely at the top. And then Mark Daigneault still
Yep.
has got to be up there for me. He's one of the best coaches in the league. His team still has a double-digit net rating. I think he's reestablished some bona fides when they had their top three creators out, and they still have a positive net rating for the season with none of Gilgeous Alexander, Jalen Williams, or AJ Mitchell on the floor. That's pretty impressive, I would say. And yeah, again, just because he's done two great coaching jobs before this doesn't mean that he's not doing a great coaching job this year as well. So he was up there for me. They fell off. They weren't on pace for one of the best seasons of all time. He's not going to be in my top three, but it almost pains me to not have him there, honestly.
I have him third, but I could easily have Ott, Lee, Mitch Johnson there. A couple other guys that I think are a little bit worse than this, but still deserve praise, even if it's short praise. The Rockets, some of the shine has coming off them a little bit. They're still top 5 on clean the glass on both ends of the floor. And when you consider some of the absences, Fred VanVleet being out the whole year, and the various different guys that have been out for them, that is impressive, even if his offense makes me mad a number of different times. The overall philosophy, they've been able to get a lot out of this team overall. Spoelstra, I still think he's one of the absolute best coaches in the league. They don't have a lot of great defenders. They're still 5th on defense. And then they put together this fascinating offense of different version of the LaRoche style. I think that has really helped maximize guys like Jaime Jaquez. And when you consider that they're around league average on offense, with the absences that they've had, with Tyler Hero missing so much of the season, now Norm Powell's going to miss some time as well. That's really, really impressive. And then the last guy, and part of this might just be that I was too low on them, which I will openly admit that I was. I think that Darko Rajakovic has done a nice and at times underappreciated job with the Raptors. They are an ensemble cast, but I think that he has done a really nice job building a system and keeping them afloat, even when they haven't had their best guys available.
Yeah, that's normalized some here in 2026, but they were engaging in this comical, super pressing style and didn't quite have the personnel to do that. And now that he's kind of calmed that down a little bit, they have been one of the better defenses in basketball. And so yeah, he's kept them afloat. I thought that they were gonna be a surprise team this year. I was surprised to see that their over under was in the negative. But yeah, for them to be 10 games over 500, certainly he deserves credit for that. So yeah, my top three is going to be Joe Mazzulla, JB Bickerstaff, and Mitch Johnson. Mark Daigneault as my biggest apology.
And the only difference for me is I have Daigneault over Mitch Johnson, and Mitch Johnson's probably my biggest omission. So it's a close top 4.
Yeah, and there are other coaches that have done some stuff that I'd like to, Eric Spoelstra in particular, but just the Heat overall haven't been enough of a force that I can really seriously consider him in this range. David Adelman was getting some love for me, and then they got hit by so many injuries. It's just hard to have him near that level at this point because they just haven't been that much above expectations, even with the injuries. But he certainly deserves some credit for the way that they played when Nikola Jokic was out. And I think he deserves some credit for the fact that they actually have been semi credible offensively with Jokic off the floor and Murray on this year. Murray deserves a lot of credit too for just being better this year. Will Hardy, coach of the year, he's really he's doing exactly what his bosses want, right? Sorry.
Yeah, there's a
Oh,
different award for that.
okay, let's get to sixth man, which is always a difficult one. This was there are a lot of guys who are kind of in this mix and then just ascended to being starters, like Colin Gillespie, who now have thinned the field somewhat. This is always hard because, as I say every time, choosing who between the 100th and 110th best player in basketball is a lot harder than choosing the first through 15th best players in basketball. And it's equally hard because I would say some of the most effective guys just haven't played that many minutes and are even getting doubled up in terms of minutes, right? Like, would you agree with me that per play, Alex Caruso is the best defensive player off the bench?
It's him and one other guy, but yeah, I mean Crusoe, he
Isaiah Stewart's your other guy.
yes.
Yeah,
But I
I
think
mean
Cruz,
he's been unbelievable for sure.
yeah,
Um,
Ben Crusoe, this has been an unusually bad offensive season for him. 32% on threes, 55% true shooting, and he has a very small role within the Thunder offense. That's not a problem. It's just
yeah,
what
but
Alex
I
Crusoe.
will note that they are still better offensively with him on the floor than off the floor, so he can't be
Yeah.
hurting him that much.
Yeah, and so I mean Caruso, to me Caruso is the best player who comes off a bench, but that's a little bit different because he's missed so much. He's missed so much time that
Yeah,
I mean
only
he's
740 minutes in 40 games. I mean, it's not even so much the missed games, but it's also 18.5 minutes a game, and that's tough. Now, I will say a lot of games that he's available, he does close. That's one of my criteria for six
Mhm.
man is that you need to be a real closing candidate for your team.
That's true. And I think that this is a weaker field with that criteria than the Raffin is. And so I want to bring up a couple other guys, and I'll walk through my ballot at the end. So like, I'm a huge AJ Mitchell fan, and the Thunder have been very successful, even in the AJ Mitchell on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander off minutes this year. However, what has propelled those lineups is incredible defense. Like they've been great, and I think AJ Mitchell is better defensively than some of his brethren, but to give him the like they're well below average offensively in just that split. Overall, Thunder have a good offense with AJ on the floor, but that's because there's another guy who's better at offense than him. So I think Mitchell is in the conversation, and he's played 1.5 times roughly the minutes that Caruso has. So I factor that in to an extent. So he's in the conversation. There are two Spurs that I think deserve serious mention here. Luke Cornett has kind of one of the old school cases that I loved, which is that he is a valuable defensive player. I mean, the Spurs have a 112.3 defensive rating with Cornette on and Wembanyama off. That's totally respectable. That's better than a number of other guys. It's not, it's not like Wemby or anything like that, but it's very good. They have a plus 4.8 net rating with him on and Wembanyama off. Like that's very good. And there are other players who do some of the lift. And one of the other guys who does the lift is Keldon Johnson. Like Keldon Johnson, he's not going to make my top three, but by just so we have it, 64% true shooting on 25% total creation. Like that 25% total creation, it's
Yeah,
not the highest on the list, but he's doing a lot. Like he's taking a lot of shots for the Spurs team when he's on the floor. Like his scoring creation is almost as high as Reed Shepard and AJ Mitchell. His passing is way lower. But like
yeah,
Keldon Johnson is doing a lot. Like I wouldn't be totally stunned if he ended up making my top three in the end ballot.
yeah. He's an interesting case for me because those raw numbers are very good. Not someone who is closing games very often. Not is really just more of an adequate defensive option at best. And but also if you look at what the Spurs offensive numbers are, and you just go through the true shooting in their lineup, there aren't really that many guys who are that efficient on this team. They got a lot of kind of inefficient guards soaking up possessions, and then it's him, Wembanyama, and Cornette are kind of the most. I guess Barnes is pretty. It's pretty interesting that all the front court guys are the really efficient ones. But yeah, I think just the fact that he's not really a serious candidate to close is part of why I don't have him in my top bit. But like those numbers were really interesting. I also maybe I just it's rare that I see one of his really awesome games for whatever reason when I watch Spurs games. Um, yeah, I mean, do you want to go through Stewart's candidacy? I think the one thing that gave me a little bit of pause is that his on-off numbers are actually not that great. Most of that coming on offense, but part of that is because he doesn't play as much with Cade as Duran does. But he's not a great offensive player. Like that's certainly is true. He's a below average offensive center, but yeah, definitely a very very solid defensive player. I mean, he and Caruso are clearly the two best defensive players coming off the bench.
Oh, so I was setting this table when I talked about Isaiah Stewart in the context of the defensive player of the year guys. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
his contest rate is high, 32%. The 42% percentage on the shots he contests is preposterous. Like, even if you regress that to the
Yeah.
mean, it's still fantastic.
Well,
And
and
his
it's been this way for several seasons too. I mean, it maybe not quite at this level, but certainly he's always been one of the best guys in these.
And his deterrence is real. I mean, 27.5 rim attempts per 100. Now, the Pistons perimeter defenders deserve some credit for that too, but he does it. And their defensive rating is way worse than a lot of the other defensive player of the year guys, 111.6, but opponents are shooting hotter on threes, 36.5. That's a full percent better than Gobert on and pretty much a full percent better than Wemby on. And so, like, to me, Stewart, he does that, and so I brought up why I think there's a little bit in the overall defensive stuff. Like, his stuff is going extremely well. He is a flawed offensive player. Okay, he does the most important thing for his position well. And the other reason, so I have Stewart number one. Like, he's my sixth man of the year right now.
Mhm.
And part of the reason is that I love the case for a strong offensive guy. Remember, I had Colin Gillespie number one last time. He's now ineligible. And none of those cases are great for me. Like, I think the best offense first case is Reed Shepard, but Reed Shepard, he's like, I mean, 56% true shooting himself. The off like that, you don't see the huge differential which you'd love to see in Houston's overall offense. Now, some of that is who he plays with and who he doesn't play with, but like, and Shepard, his numbers, like for some of the all-in-ones, especially the offense specific versions, are very positive, but it's like he doesn't have this also because of how Ime Udoka, like, you can criticize the scheme a little bit, like he's loved by some of that stuff, but like, to me, it's not a screaming great case for him to be the sixth man of the year.
No, I agree. If you're a little bit better of a playmaker, and he really is kind of shooting guard playmaking, and for a small guard, you want that to be higher. He's better defensively than some guys of his ilk, although he continues to get dinged for his defense. But that's just because everyone else on the team is huge and a really good defender. Ayo Dosunmu, certainly his individual stats are awesome, but the team his both of his teams have been a lot worse when he's been on the floor. I struggle with that a little bit. And Caruso like the Thunder are plus 18.8 when he's on the floor. They have a 100.4 defensive rating when he's on the floor. That's just really it's really hard to get away from that. And Naz Reid also is putting up a very similar season to some of his best, 59% true shooting. He's bombing threes, 8.5 per 36, hitting 39%. He wouldn't be anywhere close to my top group, but Tim Hardaway Jr. deserves some credit for
Mhm.
actually being the efficient scorer that everyone thought he was for the last 10 years and kept paying him to be at 40.5% from three and 9.1 per 36. And he's stepped in, started some games while playing 27 minutes a game, which I don't think anyone really thought he was going to have to do or wanted him to do. Oso Gadaro kind of has like a Stewart light case, but he actually closes games. Admittedly, his team doesn't have Jalen Duran on it. As an infinitesimal offensive role, other than as an occasional passer with 9% scoring creation.
Oh,
That's pretty low. But the Suns are 8.5 points per 100 better. That's another thing I really want to look at with this six man is are they better with him on the floor than off? Like, are you bringing him in to really boost the team? They're plus 5.6 when he's out there, and 107.5 defensive rating with him on the floor is a pretty ridiculous number. He's up there for one of the better defensive guys coming off the bench as well.
I want to shout out Mitchell Robinson. Another his
Yeah,
team is better with him on than off, and Robinson is a passive force on the offense glass. Even smaller offensive role than Oso Gadaro. He's below 10% total creation, which is wild. But he's a capable defensive player and this just monster that makes a lot of other things better. So I think that I want to mention Mitchell Robinson. He didn't make my top three, but he's in the kind of in the vicinity. And I just think he's one of the better permanent guys. Should we mention Quentin Grimes as well?
sure.
Grimes, 60% true shooting, uh 20 27% total creations. That's on the higher side for any of these guys. The demerits, I mean the Sixers are slightly better when he's on the floor. I really like Quentin Grimes. I think he's a good player. I've brought up before about whether he is at this moment in time better than VJ Edgecombe. But he's a very good player. So like I didn't put him there, but I do like him a lot.
Yeah, your guy AJ Mitchell certainly deserves to be in this mix
Oh
as
yeah.
well. I think if he'd been healthy the last month, he would be right up there at this point in time. But another guy where the Thunder are plus 15.9 when he plays. I mean, that's just an insane number as well. And he's been pretty efficient. He's a great driver and also not like the absolute best playmaker for a guy coming off the bench, but still 12% passing creation is really solid. And he's also a solid defensive player. I think I ultimately, I mean, I went with Caruso last time. He's kind of been in and out of the lineup again. But yeah, I think I'll go Stewart number one. You convinced me on that.
Yay.
Caruso number two. We're gonna someday voters will actually reward defense coming off the bench. There's still voters who would probably tell you that Jamal Crawford was better than Andre Iguodala. He's a better basketball player than Andre Iguodala. As soon as Andre Iguodala makes the Hall of Fame, people are still going to say that Jamal Crawford should have been the sixth man in whatever year that was that he beat out Iguodala. It was pretty insane. For number three, I'm just like throwing darts at a dartboard here. Go with Reed Shepard.
I went Stewart 1, Caruso 2. I just think he's the best player who comes off a bench, and so I'm
Yeah.
gonna break the tie that way. And then I went Luke Cornett 3rd.
All right, let's get to rookie of the year. This is a fascinating one. Con Knipple versus Cooper Flag, and this is basically gets down to what it means to be an awards voter. It's so existential here. I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna go that far. I think I do have to go with Con, especially with Cooper missing this time and Con just continuing to come on. And it looks like he's got the momentum of a runaway freight train. How does he remain so popular in rookie of the year voting? So he's my number one. I still, if it's like I say, if it's close, I will go with the guy I think that's the better prospect, and I do think that's Flag. And it was before Cooper missed this time. I think it was pretty close, but Khan just like his case just keeps getting better and better. I mean, he's having the best shooting season by a rookie ever, and that to me eclipses like Cooper Flag is maybe having the best season by an 18-year-old ever, or a guy who started the season at 18 ever. But that's not the award. It's for who's the best rookie, and maybe throw in a tiebreaker for who the better prospect is. But I don't think there's a tie to break right now.
We are in agreement there, and I mean Cooper Flag's having a great year. I think he's been better than I expected, even with some of the challenges that he's gone through. But Con Knipple, I mean,
Yeah,
let's go through
I'd say
some.
he's been worse on defense than I expected, actually.
Yeah,
But I,
but
I,
but I could
yeah,
see that
as an
getting better.
offensive player in the ways that matter, yeah, I think he's been better. It's actually been worse as a shooter than I expected too, which is amazing to think that. Then still overall, even though he's been worse in those two areas, he still has been better than we would have thought.
Yeah, I mean Cooper Flag only 30% on his three so far this year, but his simple shot quality is just stunningly low. He's having to do such hard stuff for this Mavericks team, and I think he's done a better job with that tough lift. But Con Knipple, 65.5% true shooting and 31.7 total creation. Like that's a really that's a big role for a rookie. I mean, it's not in the same vicinity as like some of the other wild guys, but I mean, for a rookie, that's really good. I mean, he's already made the most threes in a rookie season of anyone in history. He's shooting a ridiculous 44% on 9 per 36. And yes, most of those come via catch and shoot. He's not doing a ton of self-created. Who gives a crap? You're shooting that well, it doesn't matter how it comes. And he's been a part of this massively successful offense. He's not getting killed on defense. So I am less, I've always been more aggressive on the it's the best season, it's not the best prospect. But to me, this isn't close enough. So it's Knipple 1, Cooper Flag 2, even though I wouldn't change, we did top prospects earlier in the year, but I wouldn't change my ranking of those two as prospects for on this. But Knipple's been great. That is nothing to denigrate it. Then the third spot is a little bit more open. I know that there's a lot of buzz around VJ Edgecombe, who is having a very good year, of course. And Edgecombe has not only a smaller role within the offense than Cedric Howard, but also he's been way less efficient individually despite his terror in transition status. Like VJ having 54% true shooting when you consider what he does in transition is actually pretty disappointing. But he brings a lot of other things to the table. Like I'm not saying I'm low. I'm higher on Edgecombe than I was going into the season. But if I'm going to say who's been better this year, I still go Coward over Edgecombe personally.
Yeah, I mean, Coward, it's been a while. He's been out recently, but for a lot of the season hasn't been on a real team. 3-point shooting is down to 34% at this point in time. And VJ is averaging 35 minutes a game and has played 700 minutes more than Cedric Howard. I think I got to go with VJ. Like Coward hasn't been so impressive to me. And VJ also has been getting more efficient as time has gone on. His 2-point shooting is getting better. Coward actually doesn't really make that many plays defensively, which is a little bit of a concern to me. But like Coward is not so awesome, especially with this recent downturn, and especially with Memphis just punting the season, that I can put him above VJ. VJ, the performance that he's put in on a real team that's been trying all season, and then you throw in as well, like even if you want to say that they've been close on a permanent basis, that VJ's played, what is it, 40% more minutes than him. I think I gotta go with VJ.
The real question for me is going to be, can I figure out a way to get Dylan Harper in that third spot by the end of the year? Can I contort myself mentally to have the guy that I love the most there? But I'm not sure that.
All right, so I think we're getting closer. Let's save the rest until later. Those are all the official player awards. By the way, we don't do most improved until the end, just because that's so subject to shooting luck and it also takes a lot of work to get to. So we usually save that until the end of the season. But we still have some other cool stuff. We got all of our invented awards: sophomore of the year, biggest surprise, players and teams, most disappointing player and team, and then executive of the year and not executive of the year. Those, especially after the trade deadline, I want to make sure we give those plenty of time to discuss. So please come back exclusively on Dunc'd On Prime tomorrow to get those. And thanks so much for watching, listening, and subscribing.